With the way talent in the game of basketball has continued to excel in every facet and skill set among young and up-and-coming players who have the hopes and dreams of one day being able to play basketball at the highest level in the NBA, it's no wonder high school kids strive to do everything they can to be a high-level prospect in their senior season. So much so to the point where some players aren't even as focused on winning in high school, but rather just tallying stats and insane highlight reels to impress college and NBA scouts. And every year we get our top 100 high school recruits at the end of the season, and while the goal for the best high school athletes is to seek that number one high school prospect position, it hasn't always translated into one day being a generational talent and superstar level player in the NBA. In fact, a lot of number one prospects end up having very short careers in the NBA. Why, you might ask? Well, I have a few theories, and it's why we're going to be taking a look at some of the past number one recruits coming out of high school and where they failed in developing their game to being one of the best high school basketball players in the nation to barely being able to get minutes in an NBA game. If you're new to the channel and you enjoy this type of content, feel free to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a video, and in return I'll be providing more NBA content like this all season long. And before I get into the topic, a quick word from today's sponsor, Aura. Now, I'm sure most of you know anyone can find anything on the internet, including your full legal name, your personal email, your home address, phone number, and even your relatives. And for me personally, I never took this kind of stuff seriously, that people can take your personal data and use it for their own financial gain. Well, in 2016, my wife got her identity stolen, including her social security number, credit card information, and it was a nightmare trying to get everything sorted out. From recouping loans that were taken out in her name, shopping sprees on the credit card, like there are some really bad people out there. It's sad to say, but it's true. Do a Google search for your personal information or someone you know and see if a people search site shows up. This information is accessible because of data brokers who profit by selling your information to robocallers, telemarketers, spammers, and anyone else that wants to learn more about you. And so for me, protecting mine and my family's personal data and information is of the utmost importance because of that terrible experience we had 7 years ago. That's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, Aura. Aura will identify data brokers that are exposing your information and automatically submit opt-out requests on your behalf. They will even opt out of junk mail and telemarketing lists. Aura also monitors your emails and passwords to see if they were involved in any data breach and exposed on the dark web. Aura's app also features a VPN, password manager, real-time credit and identity theft monitoring, internet parental controls, and protects your devices from malware. Aura has almost every internet safety tool you'll ever need, all inside one app, which is what makes it so amazing, so that you don't have to use multiple platforms and sites to protect yourself. Let Aura do the hard work of keeping you safe online. If you sign up right now, Aura will give you a 2-week free trial with my link down below. You'll be shocked at how much of your private information Aura finds exposed over those 2 weeks. Guys, I was shocked at how much of my information Aura was able to find when using the app. Go to aura.com/hoops1 to start your free trial, also linked in the description, or you can scan the QR code here. But with that said, let's get back into the video. Now, of course, there have been a lot of great number one overall recruits in their high school class, like LeBron James in 2003, Anthony Davis in 2011, and even Dwight Howard back in 2004. But for the most part, a lot of number one prospects over the past 20 years haven't even made a single All-Star game. In fact, on average, these number one recruits have only been able to last 6 seasons in the NBA. Don't get me wrong, making it to the NBA and even making it past your rookie season is a huge feat in and of itself. Reaching the pinnacle of your craft is an accomplishment for anyone, no matter what. But still, would have expected more from these guys considering the hype surrounding them coming out of high school. For reference, here's a list of all the number one ranked high school players from their respective classes since LeBron James in 2003. Of these 18 players, only 2 can be considered superstars, or at least once superstars when they were in their primes, in Anthony Davis and Dwight Howard. Only 3 have ever been selected to All-NBA teams if you add Ben Simmons, and only just 4 have been selected to any NBA All-Star game in their careers, if you include Andrew Wiggins, which I think most would argue probably wasn't as deserved as some of the other All-Star selections in that year. Now, of course, some of these guys are still very young and could become future stars or superstars in a few years. Guys like Cade Cunningham has shown true promise of being a generational level talent, and despite Chet Holmgren getting injured and missing his entire rookie season, there is a lot to like about his game being an active, mobile, outside shooting big man that can protect the rim and handle the ball. But really, outside of those 2 who have just started in their NBA careers, For some of the other young ones, it's hard to envision a world in which they can truly live up to the hype of being the #1 ranked player out of high school, looking at the last 10 years alone. And you'll see 2 players are already out of the NBA and could barely get rotational minutes after their rookie seasons in Josh Jackson and Jahlil Okafor. James Wiseman was taken by the Warriors 2nd overall, wasn't able to stay healthy, and even when he was healthy, he could barely dominate in the G League after being sent down to work on his game, and has since been traded. Derek Favors, Brandon Jennings, OJ Mayo, Greg Oden, the #1 recruits from classes 2006 to 2009, all out of the league, and aside from Derek Favors, none of them made it to the age of 30 in the NBA. Nerlens Noel, another player that can barely stay on the court and even get meaningful minutes when he is healthy. Josh McRoberts, anybody remember him? He was the #1 recruit in 2005 and the only #1 recruit who ended up not being a one and done in college, and was even drafted in the 2nd round after his sophomore season because of how poorly he played in college at Duke, falling well below expectations of being the #1 recruit that the Blue Devils thought that they were bringing in. Marvin Bagley, disappointing to start his career. RJ Barrett, he's been okay, but certainly isn't looking to be a generational talent a lot of scouts had expected of him coming out of high school. Again, none of these players, with the exception of Dwight Howard and Anthony Davis, have even come close to being considered top 10 players in the NBA at any points in their career. So why is this? Why is it that so many of these expected to be future NBA stars have incredibly underwhelming careers? Was it simply the pressure of being such a hype prospect that weighed on them mentally? Or was it something else? Now, of course, there are a lot of factors that have to be called out, one being injuries. Who knows what some of these players would have been able to become had they not suffered injuries early in their careers or even before they entered the league. Guys like Greg Oden, who looked absolutely dominant in college with his size, strength, combined with his incredible footwork in the paint. Like, you can clown the Blazers for taking him over Kevin Durant in the 2007 draft, but you cannot deny watching Greg Oden in college and looking like he was going to be a force in the NBA at that time. Injuries were still a concern because of his frame, but I don't think anybody would have expected his career to just be absolutely riddled with injuries to the point where he was only able to play 105 games in his entire NBA career and was out of the league by the time he was 26 years old. Same can be said for guys like Nerlens Noel, another gifted big man coming out of high school but ultimately suffered a fair amount of injuries, including one in college that really derailed his career. The other factor is simply the general evolution of the game of basketball. It's no secret that the NBA has become a shooter's league with more and more attention and focus on three-point shooting. For some of these guys, when coming out of high school and being crowned the #1 prospect, it was either before a time where the game was heavily predicated on three-point shooting, or it was just starting to head in that direction, but not to the extent that you see it today. Ben Simmons was the #1 recruit in 2015 and was touted as being the next greatest prospect since LeBron James. And this was knowing full well that Simmons couldn't shoot a three-pointer to save his life, even by high school three-point range standards. And yet, he was the overwhelming #1 recruit coming out of high school and was the consensus #1 pick in the NBA draft that following season. 2015 is really when the three-point shot, backed by analytics and the need for floor spacing, truly started becoming popularized when a young, heavy-volume three-point shooting dominant team in the Golden State Warriors took the league by storm and won their first championship. Just when most analysts said three-point shooting teams don't win championships. From that point on, that narrative completely shifted, and it's why guys like Ben Simmons weren't seen as valuable in the league when they became such a liability in offense in the modern NBA. The same thing can be said about Jahlil Okafor, who represented a more traditional big man that isn't even seen as valuable in the NBA like it did over a decade ago. Again, Nerlens Noel, and also once again Derek Favors, all players that became afterthoughts by the time they got to the NBA because of their inability to shoot. But all these factors aside, which I believe play a big role in why some of these #1 recruits have failed in the NBA, the biggest factor in my opinion is quite simply, these guys are just too young. Ranking 17 and 18-year-old kids and their prospecting potential before they even finish high school is right away setting them up for failure. These athletes are still young, still developing. A lot of players who aren't even ranked as top 100 recruits blossom at a later stage in their playing careers, making the ones ranked higher than them seen as not being as successful because they didn't live up to their high school recruiting rank. So much can happen in terms of a player's overall development, maturity, size, stature, strength between when they're a 17 or 18-year-old senior in high school to when they hit the peak of their prime in their mid-20s. Maturity plays a huge part in this because while one high school prospect may look like they have all the skills, tools, and intangibles necessary to be a future superstar, you simply cannot gauge how a player over time is going to mature, adapt, and adjust to being in the spotlight on the biggest stage. You don't know how they're going to respond to players telling them what to do when they have been praised and fawned their entire high school careers because of how much better they were than their peers. How are they going to handle when the competition is 10x what they've experienced in high school than what it is at the NBA stage? There was just no way of knowing how these high school players are going to handle the game mentally once the stakes are higher. And that has indeed been the case for a lot of these #1 recruits over the past 2 decades. You look at a guy like OJ Mayo, so much talent, so athletic, elite level scorer, started out well in the league, but accepting lesser roles, putting his ego in check was a huge test for Mayo. And when his performance started dipping overall, he looked to performance enhancing drugs and was banned from the NBA for 2 seasons for violating their anti-drug program. And Mayo's career never recovered after that. Jahlil Okafor, another case of poor attitude, lack of self-discipline, and work ethic to really get better and improve his skills to adapt to the modern-day NBA game. Josh Jackson, another player who struggled having the discipline and maturity to truly use his talents into becoming a star player with his on-court and off-court antics, and will get frustrated in taking his poor play out on his teammates and his coach. Brandon Jennings, to an extent as well, but for him, it was more of his ego that got in the way and thinking he could just throw up any shot no matter the circumstance or flow to the game. And it also just didn't help that his game fell off a cliff by the time he was traded away from the Detroit Pistons and then never recovered as a result after that. And then of course Ben Simmons, although his is more of a confidence issue than anything, to the point where he has psyched himself out so much so on offense that he bypasses open looks on layups. So all of this to say, when people look back and are surprised by the underwhelming careers of former #1 high school recruits, they really shouldn't be, because it is way too early for rankings like this to be placed on kids who haven't even finished growing, haven't even finished developing both mentally and physically, and especially when assessing their skills against other high school players and not knowing how those skills are going to translate when up against the highest level talent in the world. But you let me know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments if you feel differently. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.